Aye.
Hi, Lincoln. Let's see. Okay. I'm just gonna turn off myself. Let's see. How do I do that? Okay. And I think we're recording. Right. Good. Okay, so here we go. The first question is, well, what do you think the recent elections where Democrats thumped Republicans in the elections in New Jersey and Virginia, what do they portend for the Republicans in the upcoming midterm elections? And do you think it was a sort of referendum on Trump and Trumpism?
It was more of a rejection than a referendum. The scope of this defeat, while it wasn't, taking back the House of Representatives, Democrats won a contested governor's race in Virginia, where the candidate really ran as a Trumpian Republican. They elected a Democratic governor in New Jersey. They won an important referendum in Maine, which pushes for expanding Medicaid, which is essentially an affirmation of progressive health care reform, and they flipped the Washington State Senate. So this is a big victory. However, there is a lot that happens over the next year. So to assume that this means the Democrats make a sweep in fall of 2018 would be a mistake. What is clear here, and we look at this when we look at the data on the local level, if you look county by county, is that the Trump message, while still resonant in the Republican base, is no longer resonant, as you say, in the Trump base, is no longer resonant in communities that for a long time have been solidly Republican. And I'm specifically speaking about suburban, affluent, largely white, but educated communities. These are voters that have been kind of swing, but generally leaning towards Republicans. If Trump can't carry those voters, and he lost those types of regions of Virginia and New Jersey very badly, if the Republicans can't carry those voters, then fall of 2018 could be very good for the Democrats. But what that means is that Republicans have to figure out a way to triangulate themselves, distance themselves from an unpopular president while running on perhaps a Republican platform that appeals more to those voters. That's going to be very difficult. Donald Trump takes up all the oxygen in Washington, and the Republican Party in Congress is increasingly put in this position where they can't legislate, they can't pass any laws because of the incompetence in the White House, and they're spending more and more of their time covering up for what looks to be the criminal activity in the White House.
Thank you. Well, the second question will be regarding Trump's record low ratings. According to the latest Gallup poll, his disapproval rating is 32%, and only, 62%, and only 32% or 33% of Americans support and approve of the American president. How dangerous do you think it is for Trump at this stage of his presidential term?
I might rephrase that question and ask, how dangerous is this for America at this stage in Trump's presidential term? Remember, when Trump won with roughly 46% of the popular vote in November of 2016, only about 3 out of 4 people who actually voted for him thought he was, approved of him, right? So you are talking about somebody who has always been very unpopular with the American electorate. However, it is also notable that typically what an American president does, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican, is when they get elected, particularly if it's the first time in a close race. So, for example, George W. Bush in 2000, even Barack Obama in 2008, Bill Clinton in 1992, is in their inauguration address and in their first month or two in office, they make an effort to reach out across the aisle and unify the country, because it's very hard to pass legislation if you're so unpopular. Trump never made that effort, so he stayed unpopular, which is one of the reasons his legislative agenda has stalled. The reason I say that's dangerous for America is that as the election of 2018 and 2020 approaches, unless this turns around, and it's a little late in the game for the popularity to turn around that dramatically, considering how long Trump has been in the public spotlight, for decades before he ever became a politician. But if that doesn't turn around, we may see other efforts by Trump and those around him to kind of skirt or undermine democratic norms and processes so that they can stay in office longer. And here I would point your attention to voter suppression laws, which you don't see a lot internationally because they tend to be passed on the state level. Also, efforts to weaken our first rights, which are our rights of freedom of speech and expression and assembly. And we're also seeing that at the state level. And also efforts to suggest that Democratic victories are the fruits of election fraud. And this is why you've seen President Trump tweet about illegal votes, which we know isn't a problem in the United States, but it's something he does to seed or lay the groundwork for an argument that if he loses in 2020, it's because of election fraud. And if he makes that argument, that will be very, very dangerous for America and for American democracy.
All right, and very briefly now, the last question: what do you expect from Mueller's investigation? There's already talk of Trump mulling the possibility of firing him, and you know it's been said that that could lead to a constitutional crisis. What is your take?
I think we're already in a constitutional crisis. I think going back to about a year and a half ago, when the Republican Congress didn't even meet with Merrick Garland, they have abdicated their constitutional role as a check and a balance on executive power, which of course is a core concept in the American Constitution. With specific regards to Robert Mueller, I expect him to be fired. I don't say that with great happiness, but I really do expect that because he is getting very close to really damaging not just the people around Trump, but the Trump family. When you hear Jared Kushner's name mentioned like this as somebody who could possibly get indicted, that cuts pretty close to the bone, right? Jared Kushner is a central part of what has become the Trump-Kushner plan. Now, if Mueller gets fired, it will be a big story in the national media, but it will be something that Republicans will care about for about 36 hours. And then you'll see, perhaps the John McCains, perhaps the Bob Corkers, perhaps the Jeff Flakes doing something, but the mainstream of the Republican Congress will move on to the next topic. So as much as it pains me as someone who cares about the future of American democracy and who thinks our Constitution has some pretty good ideas in it, I expect him to be fired. I don't see any other option for Donald Trump because the Manafort indictment, the Papadopoulos indictment, the Gates indictment, this is the beginning. It's not the end of the Mueller indictments. And Donald Trump and the people around him certainly know that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for your honest, less than optimistic analysis, but once again, very honest and bracing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Okay.